What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, Mass Media Hysteria. I am your host, Court. This is, of course, as always, Chris.
How's it going, everyone?
And today is going to be kind of a bit of a different episode. We don't have a whole bunch of topics today. We got two major topics, and we're just going to go through them. So we don't know how long the show is going to be necessarily, but today it's going to be first a spoiler-filled review of the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And then again, we're going to go full spoilers. We're going to go deep on Zack Snyder's Justice League, the 4-hour epic. I think there will be a lot to talk about there. Andris is not with us this week. He will be back next week, as far as we know. So you just got the two of us today. But with that said, I guess let's just launch into it, shall we?
Yeah, let's dive right in.
All right. So I had a screener for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So I saw it a couple days ahead of time. So at that time, there was no title on IMDb. And I honestly, I forgot to look it up. Do you know what the title of this episode was off the top of your head?
It's a New World Order.
Okay. All right, so this is, of course, the first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is the second Disney Plus series in the MCU Phase 4 after WandaVision, which wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. Before we get into details, Chris, do you want to just give me your sort of overall thoughts on the episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So right off the bat, from the beginning, you could tell right away that this is a very different show than WandaVision, tonally, aesthetically, subject matter. And which is right off the bat, regardless of what else happens in the show, I think that's something that is noteworthy, something that should be kind of applauded for a franchise like the MCU that's, justifiably been criticized for kind of following a very samey kind of formula, kind of the OG Coke formula for all of their movies. I'm liking how different their projects can get. They've done it before when it comes to like Winter Soldier and such. Like that was like a spy thriller. Then you have like goofy comedy with Guardians of the Galaxy. But just the vast disparity between WandaVision and this was the first thing that struck me. But overall, I think this was a solid first episode. It's, speaking of Winter Soldier, obviously, hence the title, it harkens back a lot to the same kind of style of storytelling, the style of filmmaking, a lot more grounded, kind of gritty, kind of handheld cinematography, and it's very political espionage. So yeah, right off the bat, I think that for a first episode, it was solid. There's a lot, that we can get into for specifics, but it's worth checking out. It doesn't quite have the same sort of hook that WandaVision had for me. Well, granted, the first two episodes of WandaVision were what were released, so I would kind of like lump them together as one. Yeah, so that's what I'll say. It's quite good, but it doesn't have the same hook as WandaVision, where I'm not like, oh, I'm dying to know what happens next.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I really liked the episode. There were a few things about it that there were a couple parts where it slowed down, particularly Sam's subplot was a little bit slow for me, but we'll get to that. I did think that the action, and specifically one sequence, which we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes, I thought the action was really good, like cinematic level, like not TV level. I thought both Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie were really, really good in it. Of course, we had, again, spoilers, we had a cameo by War Machine, which was cool. Rhodey is his name. Yeah, overall, I quite liked it. So let's I guess start with the cold open, which is and I didn't get this, but I've heard other people say that. So it's Sam. He's putting on a dark suit. We're hearing the dialogue from the end of Endgame where he's talking to old Cap. I had a lot of people telling me that they thought from that cold open that Sam was getting ready to go to Captain America or Steve Rogers' funeral. Did that come across to you, or?
No, I just figured, he was just going on about his day recently after the events of Endgame. I just thought this was, us jumping back in with Sam. I didn't necessarily link that he was specifically going to go to a funeral. He ended up not going to a funeral, so I guess, I didn't read into it that much.
Yeah. That would have been a hell of a way to start the show, though, man.
Oh, for sure.
A punch to the gut.
Yeah.
So then when we have, our opening titles, and then we jump into this action sequence where Sam is with the military. He's in, I think they said they were on the edge of Libya, but
Mhm.
they're in the Middle East. And, he jumps out of the plane, and some guys have kidnapped somebody that they need to get back. And it's this crazy aerial battle. And this thing, like, no joke, this sequence blew my mind, and it was
Mhm.
long. I think it was like 7 or 8 minutes long.
Yeah. Mhm. Oh, totally. It was, a great kind of like Bond-esque cold open, like you said, that was also kind of a parallel to opening scenes of the Winter Soldier, where Captain America jumps out of a plane, he lands on a boat to take
Right.
people off. He fights Batroc the Leaper, which also is what the Falcon does. Not sure if you caught that, but the French guy that was kicking his ass, that was Batroc the Leaper, that was also in the Winter Soldier. But
And
no,
that's
okay.
George St. Pierre, right? Like, he's a mixed martial artist or something.
Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. And yeah, same with you. I was really, impressed with this action sequence. We talked, especially during the last episode of WandaVision, not really feeling the action there. Like, that was kind of the least interesting part of WandaVision for us. That's partially because it was just kind of superheroes throwing little laser beams at each other, and it's just a colorful light show, which
And
isn't
it
that interesting.
and it was also just kind of not really what that show was. Like,
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
hook of that show was more the weirdness and the questions. Whereas, going into a show like this, it's going to be
Mhm.
balls to the wall action.
Oh, for sure. And that's why I I want to make it clear that, like, I really enjoyed the action or the opening action sequence, because it wasn't, colorful lights that were being thrown, and they were super powered people and it's super heroics and stuff, but it's down to that kind of gritty hand-to-hand combat that I like so much. I really like, martial arts. The choreography always is impressive when it's done well. It impresses me. But beyond that, like, this aerial dogfight that was giving me major Independence Day vibes. I don't know if you picked that up
I
too.
didn't, but I could totally see that. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're doing, like, they're flying and dunking and weaving in this rocky desert terrain. Really well done. And I had the same thought as you. I was really, and this is coming from, us having already seen the Mandalorian, and how big and bombastic that can get. But I was really struck by, like, holy shit, this is a TV show. This is what TV is now. This is
Yeah.
like something that, like you said, you could see on the big screen, and you'd be like, yeah, that's a big budget studio made film, a blockbuster film. And it's made specifically for television. And
Mhm.
it's kind of mind boggling, especially for, people our age and older, that remember how quaint television could be,
Oh, yeah.
even at the turn of the 21st century.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mm,
I don't know this for a fact, but I think from the way it looked to my eye, like those guys in the wingsuits, first off, that all of that was awesome.
mhm,
But I think a lot of that was done for real. I think those were
mhm.
probably stunt jumpers, and that one shot where the guy just kind of like he's gliding along, and he just sort of like rolls himself into the helicopter.
Oh yeah.
That was
Mhm,
amazing.
mhm.
Um, and like then Sam is just in the helicopter. It's like, what's up? And just
Yeah.
takes the guys out. Or the
uh,
way he catches the guy by just like flying through and grabbing him. Like, all that stuff was great.
for
I
sure.
loved I loved him looking down through the cockpit of the plane, the guy seeing him. That
Mhm,
was all wonderful. But yeah, I think probably a lot of that was like stunt jumping, and it was shot really well. I did find that sequence got a little bit too shaky with the handheld stuff sometimes.
yeah.
And I think it wouldn't have bothered me so much, except that the scene was so long. So when they did use
Mhm,
it, it really kind of stood out.
yeah.
But what an opening to that show. Like, I thought that was absolutely wonderful.
Totally, yeah. I mean, watching it with my wife, she's a good indicator for me, and how, like, sort of action scenes or suspenseful scenes kind of play out for an average kind of viewer like herself. And we watch plenty of movies, and the action just kind of goes over. She doesn't react, but she was like gripping me, and like, oh man, like, there was definitely a lot of close calls. Like, there was a moment where Sam almost flew into a freaking helicopter
Yeah.
propeller.
Yep.
And so it was cool to see him, like, this is really effective, even though, like you said, there some of the shaky cam, I'm not a fan of that. I think that's, it's been done. It's been overused since the mid 2000s. Bourne kind of beat that to death. Um, but it was still really well done. It was really like well thought out. It wasn't just, like I said, it wasn't just colorful light shows. There they were telling, as kind of basic of a story as it was telling a story from like Sam goes from A to B to C to D, and there was a cause and effect, like because he did this, the helicopter did this, yada yada. So I thought it was like really well planned out and executed.
Yeah, I would agree. So where does it, is the next sequence the therapy session? Is that where it goes next?
No, I think we see a bit more of Sam.
Oh, right. He
Yeah.
takes the shield to the Smithsonian or whatever it was.
Yes, yeah. So he's essentially at the end of Endgame, he was given the shield by Old Cap, and essentially given the mantle of the new Captain America. At the beginning of this series, it's very clear Sam is not ready to take up uh, that mantle. He's not ready to take up that responsibility, and I understandably so. I think he's even though we haven't got a ton of this character prior to the show, he's always seemed kind of like his own man. Like he doesn't seem like the type of person to just kind of, I don't know, copy someone, if that makes sense. But he's also, he's not a super soldier. He's not given the super soldier serum, and those are some mighty big shoes to fill. So I
Right.
thought the whole conflict of him kind of hesitant about taking up that new moniker was interesting.
Well, and that speech he gives when he's giving up the shield.
Hmm.
I mean, I thought Anthony Mackie was like wonderful in this episode. Again, I didn't love his subplot, but that sequence, and we'll get to the very ending of the episode, but like the sadness on the man's face was like
Hmm.
palpable, and he makes that speech and he's thanking Cap and all that, and they've got the big poster of Chris Evans back there. I loved that. And then of course we see Rhodey in the crowd. And then of course they have the little conversation where Rhodey's asking him, like, why didn't you take up the mantle? And
Hmm.
like you said, he just that's not him.
Hmm. Yeah. I good to see Don Cheadle. I thought he was good. I hope we see more of him in it. I hope it wasn't just like a small little cameo. And it's also good that it didn't feel like a big lead up to a cameo, which is, something that um everyone was, you know, burning up the internet during WandaVision. Like, who's gonna show up? Who's gonna show up? I'm done with that. I'm not gonna try to do
Bettany.
any. Oh my god. That son of a bitch, that British bastard. I'm done. I don't want to do any more speculation because I got so burnt out from WandaVision. So I'm hoping that they don't go that route. I'm hoping that if they do have, more familiar faces, they do it like this, where it's just like, boom, Don Cheadle's here.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm for it. It makes sense.
And it actually, like, I don't want to overstate this. I'm not sure how I want to articulate it, but it kind of felt, just having Rhodey there kind of felt like, oh, we're back with these guys now. Like we're
Oh,
just sort
totally.
of back with our old friends who we've known for 10 years, however long it's been. And
Yeah.
I thought that was like a really kind of subtle way to sort of just ease us back into this world.
Yeah, I don't know if you got a similar sort of vibe, but especially during the beginning and around that part as well, it was sort of like, oh yeah, this feels even more so than I think Spider-Man Far From Home. This feels like the first proper story post Endgame. And I know that WandaVision again also takes place post Endgame and it deals with the blip for about an episode. But this was the first one where, like you said, we're checking back in. Like, okay, who are these characters that we've spent so much time with? What are they doing? Like specifically affected by Endgame. Seeing Rhodey and seeing Sam and seeing Bucky. Also, I thought it was interesting because that Tony Stark obviously died. Old Cap is off doing whatever he's doing. He's not actually dead. I know everyone was calling for a Steve Rogers funeral, but he's not really dead. He's just kind of old, right? Am I wrong?
As far as they've told us, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting that it was like, essentially Iron Man's sidekick, if for lack of a better term, who's now probably going to become like, the main. He's War Machine, and he's going to get his own show. So he's going to get like propped up in the spotlight. And same with Sam. He was just kind of, Captain America's, modern day boyfriend, because Bucky was on ice for a while. So now he's getting propped up as well, and I thought that was interesting, kind of taking these supporting characters, and now we're seeing them more in a leading light.
Sure.
Mhm.
So where did the episode go from there?
From there, that's when we jumped in with Bucky. Essentially,
Okay.
we started off with which we found out was a dream sequence. It was somewhere abroad. I forget where exactly it was. But it's essentially just kind of a group of kind of seemingly businessmen, high society, maybe mobsters. It's kind of unclear. They don't say specifically, but the Winter Soldier, as he was the Winter Soldier, doing the Manchurian Candidate thing, brainwashed and stuff. He's got the mullet, was just tearing through and just killing people.
And I gotta say, watching that sequence, I was a little bit confused because I guess I didn't, until they revealed it, I didn't make the connection that this could even be a flashback or a dream sequence of a flashback. It just didn't even occur to me. So I was like, why is this guy murdering everybody? I was a little bit confused.
I believed in you, Bucky. I thought we were past this.
Right?
It was the hair that kind of tipped me off. Like, I wouldn't have immediately guessed. I was also kind of like, all right, where is this? I think I assumed that like they're not going to make Bucky like a killing machine again. So I was like, is this a flashback? And of course it was a dream, but it was a nightmare that he was having about something that he actually did, which is also brings up something that I think is really interesting about this character, is that he was this murder puppet that would kill people for Hydra, but he remembers all of it.
And I thought that too.
Screwed, man. That's so messed up, and I think that could lead to a lot of interesting emotional complexes for this.
Yeah, like, geez, Hydra, could you not have just, like, when you were brainwashing him, just put something in there so he doesn't remember?
Right? Like, you can do crazy, amazing prosthetic arms. You can make him a murder puppet. I like that. But you can't wipe his memory or something. Or maybe it was intentional. They just wanted to screw with him. They're like, you know what? You're going to do our bidding and have PTSD.
Yeah, like, it's like if you were a werewolf, but you remembered everything from the night before. That would be awful. Yeah. But that fight sequence in the hotel or whatever it was, like, that was also really well shot.
Yeah, it was brief, but it was brutal. And again, it was back to that hand-to-hand combat that I quite like. I like feeling characters like him, especially with the super soldier serum, be this visceral kind of like, oh shit, you don't want to cross these guys.
Yeah, totally. And then of course, then we see there's that one guy who's kind of the bystander, and Bucky just pops him in the head for no real reason, but
he looked at him funny. Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah. So then it's Bucky in therapy. And we find out that he's been pardoned by the government for all of his crimes, which is cool. But one of the rules of that pardon is that he does have to go to this court mandated therapy. And I really liked this scene. I thought it was low key kind of funny. Like the banter was, it wasn't like laugh out loud funny, but I was chuckling a little bit. I enjoyed that. But there was like there was a sadness there, and Bucky's just he seems like he's just trying to get through the session, and sort of she's really plying at him, and she asks him what he wants and he says peace, and she calls him out she's like, that's bullshit, because she clearly has a past in the military or whatever, and she's like, that's not, I don't believe you, that's not how it works. And one thing they did, I mean, and I said this in my review, the way the scene was shot towards the end, because she's asking him these really invasive questions, and the camera just keeps pushing tighter and tighter on them until like they're both like extreme close-ups where like you're only seeing half of their face because the camera is so close. I thought that was a really interesting way to convey how intimate this conversation was, how invasive the conversation was. Did you get a sense of that from the way they shot it, or am I out to lunch here?
No, completely. I that's one of the first things that I noticed. Just the direction of this scene, I think was really, much more subtle, especially coming from that bombastic opening that we had. I've noticed it as well. Everything from the kind of production design, like where it has this calming sort of wooded picture behind him. But even prior to it doing the extreme close-ups on his face, there was a lot of questions where they would kind of show the therapist, and she was kind of shot medium framed and everything, like kind of normally. And they would cut back to Bucky, and they would show like the top of his head. Like, right. I'm doing a bad example, but essentially it was a very simple, visual way of connecting just how disconnected, for lack of a better term, he is. Like, just for a lot of casual viewers, you may not like immediately notice it, but like subconsciously you see people framed like we are kind of now, where the majority of our bodies are kind of like in the frame and our heads are closest to the frames. But his, like I said, was like as low down as you could possibly can. There was so much headspace, so much blank wall behind him. He just looked so small and insignificant. And then yeah, when she kept kind of grilling him more, it pushed into this extreme close up where you couldn't see his chin, you couldn't see his forehead, you could just see an eye, part of his nose, his mouth. It's really kind of invasive. And I want to give a shout out to the director. Her name is Carrie Skoglund. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Apparently, she's going to be the series director for all of the episodes.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I think it's really cool. She's done movies as well, but she's done a lot of TV work, and it's cool getting some new kind of style into this show or this franchise.
Yeah, I remember for the review, I looked up her name, and I wasn't really familiar with much of what she had done, but that's cool. Bringing somebody who's maybe up and coming a little bit more and give them a project this big. That's great.
Totally, yeah.
And so far, I think it's working out.
I agree.
Also, like that we see Bucky kind of like they do in Al-Anon or whatever. Like he's having to go and make amends to all the people he's wronged during his time as the Winter Soldier or what have you.
Yeah.
And so there was that sequence with the woman in the car, and he's like just talking to her through the window and saying, you know, this and that. I thought that was kind of funny, and again, kind of sad as well. It's just further reinforcing how much bad shit this guy has done.
Yeah, totally. He definitely came across like a kicked puppy in this entire episode. Sebastian Stan does brooding very well.
He does.
Where it's not comical, because I think there's a fine line where it can kind of just be like, me, I'm sad, and that's not engaging. So he really does just seem like this dude who could be completely chill, affable in another life, but he's just been through so much crap that he's just nothing, does it for him. The therapist was talking about how he doesn't have any friends, he doesn't talk to anybody, and as we see in the upcoming scenes, he's just the dude's sad, man. The dude is depressed and he has PTSD, and that's cool. I think we mentioned it again back during WandaVision. I like when the MCU does kind of focus on like, hey, here are some actual real world ramifications of all these superheroics. And yeah, I'm all for that kind of character driven, story based stuff.
Yeah. And is that where we cut to him in the bar with the old man?
Yeah. He meets up with the old man in an alley, and then they go out to eat to lunch.
Right. And so in that scene, of course, the old man is, saying you got to have friends, and he sort of sets Bucky up on a date with the bartender. And I thought it's a little thing, but it felt very real world to me. It felt very natural. Just when Bucky's like, sorry about him, and she's like, what are you sorry for? I'm game. Like, I really like the way that moment played out. So they make plans, but then we get this sad story of this old man talking about how, his son was abroad and was murdered or disappeared, and he doesn't know what happened. I did not connect the dots in this scene.
Oh, really? Okay.
I didn't. I don't know why. I think between that and like the Winter Soldier scene, maybe I was just off my game that day. I don't know, but I didn't connect the dots there. But like, that was a pretty brutal scene, and that old man, like, that was crushing.
Yeah, there was one of those things where, I mean, it seemed sort of odd where it was like, okay, he's hanging out with this older man. And I was thinking, okay, maybe because Bucky's quite old, maybe this is some guy he knew, from the 40s or something. But as soon as the guy started talking about his son that was killed, I was like, oh, and I appreciated that we harped on WandaVision for kind of beating you over the head with exposition. They didn't. There was no like hard cut flashback to piece the dots together. It kind of just left it lingering in the air. They do confirm it later on in the story, which is a couple scenes on, so I won't jump ahead. But even then, like I said, it wasn't this flashback like, remember this. It was very like just piece it together, but the audience is smart enough to kind of put visual clues together.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and then I was gonna say that from there he goes on to the date, which,
Right.
like you said, I found the banter between them very natural. It didn't feel too marvelly jokey. There's a great bit or a great little moment of like, I forget the exact line, but Sebastian Stan says something to her and it's kind of cringy and he just kind of like looks over his shoulder just like, what the hell did I say? Like they don't call attention to it. It's not like he's kind of off in the distance, but just that look of like the dude's out of his element. It's clear he hasn't, talked to a woman in this capacity in forever. Like you said, probably since like the 40s.
Well, and even it was fairly subtle, but even the way he shows up with like a whole bouquet of flowers,
Yeah.
like for a first date, that's not something people do a lot these days. That's a very old fashioned kind of thing. And it was a nice, just subtle way of reminding us like, yeah, this guy is from another time. This
For
guy's
sure.
this man is out of time.
Yeah,
I
totally.
guess then we cut to the Sam backstory.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say before that, Bucky makes a beeline out of the date because he's just kind of freaking out. He's kind of having a panic attack, and that's where we discover where it's fully revealed the connection between the old man and the nightmare that Bucky had. Because remember, he goes into the apartment. He goes to talk to the old man. He's on his list of sort of people he needs to apologize to or kind of make amends with, and he can't really bring himself to do it just yet because he looks into the old man's apartment and he sees kind of like a memoriam, I suppose,
A
to
shrine, yeah.
to his fallen son. He sees his picture, and he can't bring himself to apologize to that man, clearly setting up, I think, what's going to be, if not the show, it's going to be one of his arcs. Like it's clear that at some point Bucky is going to tell that man what happened. But I appreciate, like I said, setting up the little seeds, the little building blocks of him just not quite ready to really truly own up and face everything he's done.
Yeah, I let it breathe a little bit.
Sure.
And that reveal, like, it was done really well. Like, it really
Mhm.
hit me in the gut. And I think when we get to the point where he tells the man, like, that scene's going to be brutal.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what the man's reaction is going to be.
I was thinking about that. Like, is it going to be rage? Is he going to forgive him because he knows what he's been through? Or like, I'm so curious because he seems like a really pretty chill old man.
Yeah.
Very sweet guy. But this man did kill your son. So I can't wait to see what direction they go with that.
Yeah, me too. Completely agree.
Okay, so then we cut to Sam and he's going back to his family. I think it was in Louisiana. I'm not certain of that.
Yeah, it was Delacroix in Louisiana.
Okay. And this was a little thing. I appreciated it. His nephews run up and they go, Uncle Sam. And it was like, Uncle Sam, because he's kind of Captain America. That's funny.
It was cute. It was a little cheesy, but it works.
It was a little on the nose for sure, but
yeah.
I appreciated it.
Totally.
And then we find out that his sister has been running the family business, catching seafood and fish on this boat that was their parents. Presumably their parents are passed on or what have you.
Yeah.
And basically the sister, whose name escapes me off the top of my head, she's basically making plans to sell the boat because she's going into extreme debt, and Sam wants a say in it, but she makes the point, like, listen, you've been gone fighting, she says, like, fighting Captain Space Helmet or something. I don't remember what she said, but it was silly. She's like, I'm the one I'm the one with the family. I'm the one, I'm losing money every day.
Yeah.
But Sam doesn't want to let it go. So he kind of makes this plan they're going to go to a bank. They're going to consolidate all the debt. They're going to get a loan. And I will say this subplot was the weakest storyline of the episode for me. I do feel like it's just set up right now. It was only the first episode, so I'm not complaining, but these moments were where the episode was at its most dry for me. How did you feel about this story?
Yeah, it definitely, for most of it, it definitely did feel like setup. Just thing, it's one of those things where I feel like it is going to be important, and it's going to be an important element to Sam's story and his emotional growth throughout this series. But it did feel kind of just like that for most of it. There's one thing I did like about it, but for the most part, I would agree that it was just kind of like, here's some, it wasn't like straight up exposition of just someone sitting you down and just talking to you. It was done a little more organically than that, but it still essentially was just sort of like, here are the building blocks that will pay off later.
Right.
And that's not really the most interesting thing to watch. However, I did quite like that scene when they were in the bank
Yeah.
for a couple reasons. One, right off the bat, besides Black Panther in the Marvel movies, they've never really have touched kind of on any issue of race or diversity. Like they've had, diverse actors in certain roles and such. In Black Panther, very much touched on kind of racial inequality and such. But there were little comments and stuff even prior to the bank scene, but especially during the bank scene, that was kind of like, yeah, I mean, Sam is an Avenger, but he's not, he's not living fancy. He's not rich. But also him and his family are they're black, like middle class families living in kind of like the South of America, and they have problems. And they, like I said, they didn't like it didn't go full tilt in that direction, but there were certain things that they were describing about kind of, like I said, the struggles that non-white people in America go through. And I thought that was interesting. It's like, yeah, bring in more real world situations. What would it be like for a non-super serum soldier that's black like Sam? What would it be like for him going through this world, or his family? And that kind of came to that scene that I liked of the bank where they were trying to get a loan, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, and it, what a piece of shit, that smarmy dude who for half of it is essentially like, I know you from somewhere. Who are you? Are you a sports player? And then he does the little thing like, oh, you're the Falcon. Oh my God. And he has this like fanboy geeking out moment.
Mhm.
But then at the end, it's still like, yeah, we're not going to give you the loan. And it's like, that's rough.
And that scene really did take a turn because it starts off kind of playful and kind of funny, and Sam's having a good time.
Mhm.
He seemingly likes that he's been recognized, and I'm sure he's thinking that's going to work in his favor.
Mhm.
And then yeah, this guy just ends up saying like, and that's one thing the scene did really well. I mean, you were saying real world problems, and it touched on a few things very organically. But
Mhm.
like you said, the whole race thing, but then it was also, he says, you haven't had income for 5 years, and Sam says, I've been gone for 5 years. And
Mhm.
when he says gone, he means the blip. He was out of existence. So they touch on what that can be like in a very simple way, but coming back and the ramifications of that. They also touch on how do superheroes make money,
Mhm.
because he says, yeah, we don't get paid by the government, and he suggests there's a lot of goodwill out there. People will, kind of give you stuff because you're an Avenger.
Yeah.
But then it comes to it, and the moment where it really switched for me, and I loved this, but the guy basically is fanboying out, and he says, "But we can't give you the loan. But can I get a selfie with you and the thing?" And
Oh, yeah.
like, I wanted to punch him in his face, and
Right.
Sam's face just changes, and
Mhm.
he says like, "Seriously?"
Yeah.
And I think the sister's kind of laughing the whole time because he's an Avenger and he's not used to being treated this way, but she's absolutely used to being treated this way
Mhm.
throughout the whole episode. She's saying they're not going to help us, and he's
Yeah.
being all optimistic about it. But she understands she understands the reality of her life,
Mhm. Oh,
and that
totally.
scene drove it home in such a great way.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was the strongest point of that subplot, and you're completely right. How it just kind of like, that was that was the kind of the thing that's sealed the deal of just like, this guy's a piece of shit. But also, yeah, afterwards the conversation, his sister, who I believe her name is Sarah Wilson,
Okay,
the character, she was just like, yeah, I've been doing this. I've been down this route. Because right afterwards, Sam was like, don't worry, we're gonna go to this bank, we're going to this bank, that we're going to keep fighting. And she's like, no, man, I'm tired. And it's interesting, again, like how difficult it must have been for the people who did get blipped into nothingness, but how difficult in its own ways it was for the people left behind. That's always a fascinating kind of concept. And also it kind of brought to light, and we they dealt with it mostly with Sam, but just like visually, they kind of showed Bucky's apartment as well, which is just it's a broom cupboard. Like he's sleeping on the floor and his kitchen's right there. It's very small. And I get that he's probably like in, I don't know, witness protection. They didn't really quite say he's given a pardon, but yeah, it really just kind of highlights like, oh yeah, the Avengers, they don't get paid. Like, what do they do? Like, it seemed like they lived on like that campus, the Avengers kind of compound
Yeah.
when Tony Stark was there. But post that, it's like, yeah, who's paying the bills? It's like, can't Pepper give him some checks or something? Like, hey, you guys kind of saved, the universe and my husband and everything. Well, kind of at some point. You saved him sometimes and he kind of didn't at the end. Here's some checks for life. You're all covered because
Right.
but no, she's running Goop or whatever the hell
Right.
Gwyneth Paltrow is doing. So that was interesting. I didn't really think of it prior to that. Like, what do they do for money?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I guess because the Avengers compound was destroyed at the end of Endgame, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It
so-
was atomized. It's just nothing.
right.
Yeah.
And it also begs the question too. I was thinking about it watching the bank scene
Mhm.
in the context of the racial divide. I was like, if this were like, well, I don't want to say Steve Rogers because he didn't get blipped, so that's a false comparison. But I don't know if this were Peter Parker, would he get the loan? I kind of feel like he probably would have.
Yeah. They didn't like overtly kind of say it, but it was definitely there. And there was a quote, and I don't want to misquote it, but there was something that Sarah said, essentially like, when it comes to having the payments or the having penalties or whatever, it always like ends up around our necks. And
Right.
it felt very much like not just like people who are poor, but people who are not white talking to this white banker.
Right.
And like I said, I thought that was subtle, and I thought that was like, it's interesting that they're touching on it without like kind of turning to the camera and saying like racism, because I think a lot of times in real life, just from experiences that I've heard, from people relaying their personal experiences to me, it is a lot of like microaggressions throughout the days that just kind of add up, and it's just kind of like, it's, you know what I mean, like it yeah, that was a good scene. I like what they were doing with that, and I wonder if there's going to be more exploration into kind of those tensions like that for the rest of the show.
Right. I hope there will be. We should probably move this along
Mhm.
because we got to get to Justice League. So
Yeah, let's do it.
basically just towards the end, this is the last thing that's really kind of sticking out to me. Towards the end, of course, Sam's watching TV and we see essentially that the government has a new Captain America.
Mhm.
And I'm not certain of this. I think this character is being played by Wyatt Russell.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell with the mask on. What a goofy face he was making too.
Oh my God, Wyatt Russell's not a bad looking dude. For those who don't know, he's Kurt Russell's kid. It's not a kid, no, he's a grown man. But I've mostly seen him with a beard. So when he's clean shaven, he's got his ears out. What a dork! And no, the dude's in real life. The guy's a handsome man. He's talented. Like I said, he's Kurt Russell's kid. So who cares what I think? But just that costume didn't do him any favors, because it was like a weird, awkward, like low angle kind of push in, and his ears were out. And I'm like, this is the guy. I get that he's white, but like, is this the guy that you chose to follow up Steve Rogers? But what a stab in the back, because
sorry, go ahead. No, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, because I believe that the guy that introduced Wyatt Russell, they called him Captain America. They didn't call him whatever
U.S. agent.
Yeah, which a lot of people theorized that he was going to be, and he probably still is. But they called him, here's the new Captain America. But the guy who introduced him was the same guy that I believe Sam gave the shield to at the Smithsonian. And it's like, you're doing the right thing, blah, blah, blah. What? Oh, that was the thing that bugged me. Because I saw it coming, but the fact that it was the same guy, I was like, you piece of shit. Like, you took the shield fully, like, making Sam believe, like, oh, we're gonna honor it. You made the right choice. No one should have this mantle. And then 2 seconds later, it's like, oh hey, there's a mediocre white dude. Let's just give him the mantle.
Yeah, and like I was actually angry at the
Mhm.
TV in
Oh
that
yeah,
at that last scene, and
yeah.
just the sadness and the hurt on Anthony Mackie's face was so palpable. Like
Mhm.
he was amazing in that scene without saying a word.
Totally. Yeah. No, I really liked both Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan in this. They're great. They neither of them have been given a ton to do in the Marvel movies. So they're like in the first Avengers, Bucky had a good amount to do. In Winter Soldier, Sam had a good amount to do, but especially in the last two Avengers films, they were barely in it. And it's great to see, similar to how Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, it was amazing to see them, be able to branch out and get the focus that they deserve with their own show. I'm so happy that Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan are getting the same, because I think they're terrific.
Yeah, I would
Mhm.
absolutely agree.
Cool.
All right, so that's Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 1. We are going to move on now to the big topic, even though we spent like half the episode on Falcon and Winter Soldier, but here we are.
Uh,
So Zack Snyder's Justice League, I don't want to go too much into, I think most of us know the story, but 2017, Zack Snyder was doing Justice League as a follow-up to Batman versus Superman. There was a family tragedy in his family. He was also feeling a lot of pressure from Warner Brothers to completely change his vision. He ended up stepping away from the project. They brought in Joss Whedon, who of course is known for directing Avengers and Age of Ultron, to kind of, this is my word, not theirs, but to kind of marvelize the DCEU, make it a little more quippy and goofy and colorful, try and make it more like an Avengers movie. Didn't work out that well. I'll admit, I kind of bought into the Justice League Joss Whedon hype at the time, and I gave it a positive review. And there are still things about that movie that I like. However, I did try and rewatch it about a month ago and I couldn't get through it. I was just like bored. So eventually, fans released the Snyder Cut hashtag came along. We found out that Snyder did have a cut of the film. It was unfinished,
mhm.
but he did have a full cut, which was over 4 hours long. HBO Max jumped in, gave him $70 million to complete it. He did a few reshoots, and it came out the other day. And it is 4 hours and 2 minutes long.
Mhm.
It's a slog to get through. It was for me anyway. Not that I didn't enjoy it, I did,
Mhm.
but it was long. I felt that length.
Yeah.
Um, it is, for anyone who hasn't watched it, you should probably not be watching this because we're going full spoilers here, but
Full
it is
spoilers, baby.
it is split up into 6 chapters and an epilogue, which I think was a really good call, uh, for me anyway, because I had to take breaks. I can't sit still for 4 hours. I've never been able to do that. First, if you want to just give me your overall thoughts on this film.
Yeah, leading into it, I think we talked a lot about neither of us being all that excited. We were more interested in this project than kind of like, we were not against it. So we're any people that were a part of the release of Snyder Cut kind of like movement. We were neither of us would like were anti that. I think we were both interested, but none of hypothetically, if like last year they said, you know what, we're not releasing a Snyder Cut, I think it would have been fine. So I went in just kind of like, okay, I'm interested. I really liked this movie. I was surprised by how much I liked this movie. It's not perfect. I wasn't hearing, angels singing by the end of it. It wasn't the second coming. Um, and I think it benefited for me coming in it with kind of low expectations, because I only recently watched the Justice League version a few months back just in preparation, because when it first came out, I didn't have any interest. The fans didn't seem to like it, critics didn't seem to like it, so I was like, whatever. That was no good. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by how into this movie it was. I was, and just how well done it was in a lot of areas. Mhm.
Yeah, for me, I had a similar thing. I kind of I got significantly more psyched for it in the past few days because I was just going to be like, I was just thinking, I'm a fan of Batman versus Superman. It's got a lot of problems that I recognize, believe me, but
Mhm.
I really like Affleck as Batman. I really like Henry Cavill as Superman. I like
Mhm.
Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. Um, so just being back with these characters in something I haven't quite seen before, I was getting a little bit psyched, but I was more interested in the movie almost on an academic level. Like, just how is it going to be different with the scenes that are the same? How are they going to be recontextualized?
Mhm.
Like, so I went into it kind of like that. I think maybe you liked it a little bit more than I did, but I did quite like it. I enjoyed it. It should be said that the main story is pretty much identical to the theatrical cut. It's the same
Mhm.
major beats, but
Mhm.
the amount of detail character wise, and there's one in particular that we'll really have to talk about, but
Mhm.
the amount of detail, the amount of sort of side stories, it really it feels like a much more fleshed out version. It feels like it flows better. The Justice cut, everything felt so jagged, and you could
Mhm.
really feel the two different tones of the two different directors. One thing I found really shocking, actually, before we get into any specifics here, I was certain that the opening of the theatrical cut with the cover of Leonard Cohen's Everybody Knows, and it was that slow mo montage taking place in London, I believe,
Mhm.
with like there was a hate crime going on, and I was certain that was Snyder. I was sure that was Snyder because that like reminded me of the Watchmen
Mhm.
open very very much, and I guess that was Whedon,
Mhm.
and I'm absolutely shocked by that.
Mhm. I feel it. Yeah, there was a couple surprises of moments that I thought were like that I was certain were like, oh, that's 100% Whedon. And there was a good amount that was of Snyder in the 2017 version. Going after I watched the Snyder's cut Zack Snyder's Justice League, I kind of just scrubbed through because it was also on HBO Max, the 2017 version, just to be like, are the how similar are these? And I think when you really kind of compare them side by side, that's when you start noticing all of the differences line up. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but for instance, the when Superman comes back and he's kind of taken on the Justice League at that time, there's a lot of moments where you compare the two where they use footage of Zack's, but it's different. There's different editing of it. There's different color correction of it, which I'll get into later. That was a big thing for me that
Mhm.
I thought was a major improvement. And then there's also like these insert shots that were reshot and stuff. So it really is like, oh man, this is such a Frankenstein's monster of a movie. And another big example of that is the Wonder Woman for when she comes in to stop the terrorists. It's a weird amalgamation of stuff that Zack shot, and then just weird things that Joss Whedon shot, and they look night and day different. Um, Even before I saw the Zack Snyder's cut, I noticed something was off about a lot of those scenes. But looking at them side by side now, it's like, how did anybody kind of approve this? It just looks really bad. It's completely noticeable when they cut in between the two in comparison now.
Right. Well, and one moment that really stood out to me on how, like, I almost get the impression, and I don't know too much about what's going on with Joss Whedon these days. I know there are some allegations and Buffy and all that kind of stuff. I don't really want to go there because I don't know, but
Mhm.
I got the distinct impression after watching this that he kind of went in to Justice League and just said, like, I'm just going to put my fingerprints all over this, even when
Mhm.
it's not necessary.
Yeah.
And the moment that really solidified that for me was, again, after Superman Returns, when he and Lois go back to his house or her house or Martha's house. I think it's Martha's house. And in the Snyder cut, like, he hasn't spoken since she saw him again to this point.
Yeah.
And he says something, and she says, "Oh, you talked," and he said, "Did I not before?" In Joss Whedon's cut, she like hugs him. She's like, "Oh, you smell good," and he's like, "Did I not before?" And it's like, you had a perfectly good line,
Yeah.
and you changed it just to make a joke that didn't even work. I found that, like, just frustrating.
Definitely. There's so many examples of that where in certain elements I could see why the intention was like, okay, this is 4 hours, we got to cut it down to two. So there were certain moments, especially when the team first got together and they were talking about their plans of attack and stuff, where in Zack Snyder's version, it's multiple scenes and multiple conversations, and then in Joss's version, it's one scene and they all quickly reshot it with the dialogue all abridged. So there's that, which I understand to like cut for time, but then you're right, there are so many other moments where it's just unnecessary, where you had a perfectly good scene and then it was just like, I gotta enter in this stupid joke that doesn't work. Like an example of is Amy Adams and Superman's mom. Like, why can't I think of her name? Diane Lane.
Diane Lane.
Yeah, they're having a conversation, and it's a good conversation about Amy Adams, coming back, or Lois Lane coming back to the land of the living. Essentially, it's a solid scene in Zack Snyder's version, but in Joss's version, there's hints of the same dialogue, but he reshot it at a different location, just bland, plain, flat lighting, hyper saturated. There's stupid jokes about like, oh, Lois, they said that you're the thirstiest girl around, and she's like, what? Like, who? It's baffling. Yeah. So I noticed a lot of that. I think that for the sake of the Zack Snyder's version, maybe like less about the comparisons of like with the 2017 version, and I'd like to focus more on like what this movie did as its own. I think that we can both agree that wherever we land on this version, it's a much better product than the 2017 one that came out.
It's a market improvement for sure.
Yeah.
And we are going to probably jump around a little bit. One
Yeah.
thing though, just because we were just talking about the scene where Martha visits Lois, I thought it was a lovely scene. I thought they were both really good in it. And then of course Martha leaves and we get the reveal that wasn't Martha, that was Martian Manhunter. And we'd known that there had been talks that Martian Manhunter was going to show up. It's General Swanwick, played by Harry Lennox. I thought it was a cool reveal, but I also felt that kind of took everything away from the scene that just happened, because that wasn't Martha,
Yeah.
That was a weird choice to me.
Yeah, that was one like fan service kind of moment that I would be like, oh, that could cut. And I know that like there are maybe some diehard DC fans that absolutely loved it. To me, it just felt weird because I felt one, that it was more emotionally resonant to actually have it be Martha and Lois Lane speaking, as opposed to Martian Manhunter speaking to her. But two, it just didn't make sense, because like it was one of those things where it doesn't make sense for the characters or for the story. It's specifically for the audience, where as soon as she walks out of the door, her eyes glow red. She turns into Martian Manhunter for a second and then changes into General Lennox, just to visually show, okay, this is Martian Manhunter and he's been the general the entire time. And it's like, why would he do that though? Why would he immediately change from his Martha persona? And then why would he change into a 4 or 5 star general? It just in this random, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would make a lot more sense to leave the Martha Lois scene as it were, and then just have Martian Manhunter come in the scene at the end of the movie. Like,
yeah,
it didn't need to be there. It felt awkward. It felt very shoehorned in.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I like that's honestly probably one of my bigger complaints of the film. So I'm glad that we got that one out of the way early. That didn't work for me. It's one of those examples where I think that, just to kind of continue on like the negative things, I didn't quite mind that it was 4 hours, because I wasn't in a theater. Excuse me. I wasn't at a theater having to sit down, and like you said, I took multiple breaks. It wasn't just like one intermission. I kind of took some breaks, and that helped kind of like, it didn't feel as overwhelming. That being said, I noticed that by the end of the film, prior to the epilogue, the movie was about 3.5 hours, which is, that's still long. But I was thinking back and like, you know what? I think that you could have trimmed bits here, there, yada yada, and get a solid 3-hour cut of this movie that could have been released theatrically. And then they did do the same thing they did with BVS, where, for the diehard fans, they could have released an extended cut with all this stuff back in. And I'm sure people would have eaten it up. I would have watched it as well then. But did you get that feeling too? Like, because I don't know if you paused it at that point, like when the climax happened, did you notice that it's like, oh, hey, this is the movie's done. Besides the epilogue, which I liked, but I felt was superfluous. I was like, you could have made this a theater. Like if the Avengers Endgame could be 3 hours, then this could be 3 hours. I think
Yeah,
that they could. Yeah.
absolutely. No, it did feel, the whole movie felt a little bit self-indulgent to me.
Uh,
Um, I kind of I kind of forgive it because you know what, like Zack Snyder and his family and the fans all kind of went on this journey. And as I said in my review, to the fans, like honestly, congratulations for making this happen. That's gotta feel awesome. That's really cool.
yeah,
I
totally.
think I think that's great. But they went on this journey. Snyder didn't get paid for this. I mean, he
Hmm.
got paid initially, but not for this cut.
Hmm.
And the deal was, don't pay me. Let me have creative control. They
Yeah.
did. I'm cool with it that he got the entire thing out, but there were parts where it was just like, okay, like, did we need this?
Yeah.
Um, and I will say this before we start going through the story a little bit. I do think that like Snyder fans will love this thing.
Hmm.
People who don't like Snyder, as I said in my review, this is probably going to make you dislike Snyder even more. Your convictions, because this is the most Snyder thing I've ever seen. It's
Yeah.
really long. It's got a lot of, mythical stuff, religious
Mhm.
iconography, a lot of speed ramping, a lot of slow motion,
Slow mo.
a lot of like desaturated colors and like,
Interesting kind of needle drops. He has kind of
yeah,
not really pop songs, or at least not current pop songs. Very similar to Watchmen. There's a lot of kind of folksy rock songs
mhm,
popping in and out. Yeah, it was Snyder through and through. And although I do want to clarify that, although I was saying that I could see a 3 hour cut of this, that was still his vision. I'm glad this was 4 hours. There was something really, it was kind of affecting me as like a wannabe filmmaker myself. um there was something kind of meaningful of it being like, here's this pure unadulterated vision from this guy that you don't see very often. That's one of the main things that I actually really enjoyed about the movie, is that whereas a lot of superhero movies, especially the 2017 Justice League, really felt like just kind of a movie made by a studio, made by a committee, just
yeah,
a bunch of people being like, put this in, put this in, put this in. But you're saying, this is the most Zack Snyder movie ever, and he's had plenty of movies where it's been 100% him. um and I thought that was awesome. This really felt like, I know this is going to be sound pretentious, don't hate me guys, uh but it was really the work of like an auteur, like the someone who really had this specific vision, this specific style that's uniquely his. And anybody that anybody that even has a passing knowledge of Snyder or seen his work would probably be able to identify him, like, oh yeah, this is him. And I, for that alone, I thought it really something worth seeing.
yeah. That singular vision, excuse me, that singular vision comes through like loud and clear.
Hmm.
And another thing about this film that's very Snyder, uh, to paint it with a broad brush, but and I'll get to the visual effects in a little bit because that's another place where I had some difficulties. But
Hmm.
visually, this movie is beautiful,
Oh hell yeah.
and I know a lot of people really don't like Snyder as a director. I think a lot of people would agree that on a visual level, the man really not. I mean, he'll frame shots that look like an oil painting, like a
Hmm.
beautiful fresco or whatever. I don't know my art terms, but this film is absolutely beautiful. And one of the sequences that, and I will say the sequence went on a little bit long, but Victor Stone at the football game in the snow,
Hmm.
we saw that in early trailers for the theatrical cut.
Hmm.
That was beautiful. I loved that.
He's Snyder is like a terrific visual stylist. He even when it I mean, both in terms of kind of creating these kind of epic tableaus. There's a lot of moments of like the Amazonians and the football game is one of them. But there's a lot of moments as well where I noticed that there wasn't CGI, or there wasn't a lot of CGI, and his decision to shoot it on film, I thought was great. And the difference in color correction, which really can kind of make and break a movie to an extent, was so much better. Where essentially the structure of the image was kind of tightened, which essentially means that more of the film grain was brought out. The blacks of the color were richer, the darker. It was desaturated, but it just looks so much better. And I loved seeing the film grain on it because it felt like this real tactile kind of for most of it. There's, like you said, there's a lot of CGI. It gets very CGI heavy, but there was more moments than I thought where I was like, this looks great. For example, like early on in the bank heist, it wasn't a bank heist. It wasn't a heist. It was like a terrorist plot. That reminded me so much of a Chris Nolan movie, just the way that it was shot, especially the aspect ratio. It felt like this is Nolan entirely because there's no CGI right now. It's a lot of like, it's just clean, kind of almost sterile like images. But yeah, there's too many moments to count in this movie that were really like, that's beautiful. That's stunning to look at.
Well, and I guess maybe let's go on character for a moment. And I will say for me, Batman has more to do in here. Aquaman has more to do. Wonder Woman's kind of about the same. She's got a little bit more screen time, but they don't flesh her character out a whole lot more than the theatrical cut. But my goodness, the Flash and Cyborg.
Hell yeah.
Flash had quite a bit to do in the theatrical cut. Cyborg was almost a complete afterthought in that film.
Barely.
And it frustrates me so much that, like, Joss Whedon, you had all of this great stuff, and Ray Fisher, I'm not certain. I think this was his first film. Like, they got him at a theater. He was a theater guy. Of course, he's been clamoring for this cut this whole time because he was cut the fuck out of the entire movie.
Yeah, no, he was nowhere to be seen, pretty much in that 2017 version.
And even when he was, it was like, you know, he can connect with Batman's spider car, which I was hoping wasn't going to be in this cut because I really didn't like the spider car. Still there. What are you going to do? But here, like, they show that how he's basically a god, like how he can, you know, he can control the entire world's nuclear arsenal in a way that makes him more powerful than Superman. Like, he can burn the whole place down, to use Bruce Wayne's line. He could change the entire global
economy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I was going to say money thing.
That works too. The thing with the money and people buy stuff. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and just that moment where the single mother, where he just puts a whole bunch of money into her account, like, that was such a touching little moment. And it frustrates me so much that Joss Whedon, you had all of this good stuff, and you just decided to cut it all. And not that I should put that all on Joss Whedon, because of course the studio mandated 2 hours. He had to make cuts somewhere. I get it, but why was that what you cut? It was so good.
Yeah, I don't know. I completely agree. I thought his whole character was fleshed out really well. The moment in particular where he kind of gets a glimpse into the life of this woman, which I thought was really interesting, because it was essentially he was able to access all the times that she's been recorded, you know, whether it was like on her phone or CCTV and stuff like that. So you're able to get these little snapshot glimpses into her life. This is all done wordlessly, by the way, again, which highlights Snyder's ability as a visual storyteller. There's no dialogue about this. I mean, there's dialogue, but it's not about this moment. And he sees kind of like a virtual kind of depiction of a stack of money, whoop, makes it grow. And I'm like, that's a hero, man. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, that's really cool. People complain about Snyder for like Man of Steel and other stuff, not really showing his heroes be heroes, but just that little moment of kind of kindness, you know, added so much to Cyborg, who in the theatrical cut was just moody, grumpy robot man. Yeah. And in this, he's still moody, grumpy robot man, but there's still emotion going on underneath everything. And I thought Ray Fisher did a really good job. I think that not all of the dialogue that he was given was great. There's still some kind of clunky dialogue from Chris Terrio, and he's still, for a lot of parts, being kind of moody.
Fuck the world was a little bit much.
Yeah, it's a bit silly. But you know what I noticed though, I think this came from him being a theatrically trained actor. there was a lot of physicality to his performance. There was a lot of
There was,
ways
yeah.
where he was standing and he was like walking, where it looked like it was painful, like he's not quite used to his body, and it was subtle. And like there wasn't a moment where it's like, "Oh, Batman, it's hard to walk." Like it's literally just through his performance. And I was like, "That's cool." I mean, even if the dialogue is a bit clunky for him, the dude's doing something, and enough to the point where I'm like, man, I hope people give Ray Fisher another chance. I get that seemingly probably burned bridges with Warner Brothers, but whatever, man. I hope some other studio kind of like uh comes in, swoops in and picks him up, because I think he was good. I think he was really good.
Well, and again, and I want to touch on Flash as well, but
Yes.
you know, in the climax of the theatrical cut, like neither of those characters, Flash was off like saving the Russian family, Dostoevsky,
Hmm.
which thankfully was gone.
Oh my god.
Both of those two characters are absolutely clutch in the climax of this film.
Oh
And
yeah.
they both have this moment of, Cyborg is kind of mentally, he's almost inside the mother box and he sees his family and himself with his family. And he's given that option, like he's being tempted to, you know, give up, let the thing happen, and you can be with your family
Yeah.
with Miles Dyson. But he makes the decision. He says, no, I'm not alone, because he has this new family now.
Mhm.
Like you get this full circle arc for this character. And then Flash, of course, is having to essentially time travel and break the speed of light.
Dude.
It's so important to the end of the film. And then one moment of this flick that I really loved was in the epilogue, where Cyborg goes and pieces back together the cassette tape and listens to his fatherly message, not scientist message.
Uh-huh.
And it's the monologue is sort of cut against we seeing us seeing what's happening with the various members of the league.
Mhm.
And it's so beautifully done.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
that actually kind of felt also kind of like a Nolan moment, because Nolan will do that thing in a lot of his movies where in the big ending, like after the climax, but in the ending, um, you'll see 3 or 4 converging storylines being cut together with some kind of voiceover that applies to each one of these scenes. And I thought that's what Snyder did here, and I thought it worked really nicely.
Oh yeah, there's a definite kind of Dark Knight-ish kind of vibe where um even Dark Knight Rises as well, where like you said, there's multiple kind of like conclusions that are happening for different characters, and it's kind of like intercutting with like a singular sort of like voiceover narration to kind of link them together thematically. Um I That was the epilogue that I did like. We'll get into the other epilogues in a moment, but I do I want to touch on the final battle, because you mentioned it right off the bat. One thing that I really liked is that Superman came in, and in the original version, he did everything. He came in, he defeated the bad guy, he stopped the day. You know what I mean? Like he saved the day. So it really felt less like a team, and it just felt like shit. Like let's just get Superman, and then he could do all the work for us. But
Right.
here that wasn't the case. Superman came and he was obviously wiping the floor with Steppenwolf, and he was kicking his ass. And so he's clearly the most physically powerful person there, but he didn't save the day. In fact, he kind of lost it. The mother boxes converged, they failed. Everything was getting erased. And then my favorite moment of the movie, something where I don't really say this term very often, but it was so fucking metal that the Flash, it was he first of all, he did this thing where he was hyping himself up. He was like essentially like, well, okay, all right, Barry, you got to go faster than you ever gone before, ever faster than the speed of light. And he's saying it was like with pain and gritted teeth, and then he starts running, and he's
And
going.
you know
Go
what?
ahead.
What that really reminded me of, that moment, was in Spider-Man: Homecoming, when he's under the rocks and he's
Oh yeah. Mhm.
just, come on, Spider-Man, come on, Spider-Man. Like it
Yeah.
felt like that, and I loved it. I thought that was
Yeah,
great.
yeah. You having to hype yourself up against your entire body, screaming like, "Don't do this." But what I loved about it is that he's breaking the speed of light, and visually, the way it was depicted was so cool. Where it's essentially like time or reality was kind of like slowly fading away in one direction, and he was going the opposite direction, and he was running into nothingness. He was running into empty space, and you see like a faint nebula in the background. And as he's running into space, that's when things are starting to come in. He's literally beating time, which is so cool. And everything's kind of going in reverse, like a la Tenet. And that was awesome. And like you said, so Flash saved the day only to pass the baton metaphorically to Cyborg, who
Yeah.
then had to go into the mother box. All of them. It was a team effort. It wasn't Superman saved the day. It wasn't just the Flash that saved the day. It was all of them. And then it was Cyborg that also helped it as well. All of them had something to do in that ending. They all felt like a team,
Yeah.
which is
And
what you want. Yeah.
I felt the same way in the sewer or the tunnel fight as well. Like Superman wasn't there, but just and this was in the theatrical cut, but when Wonder Woman's sort of jumping down, going for her sword, and Flash kind of runs and tips it. But there were a lot of moments like that in the final battle that I loved. And I have to say, like, I had a huge smile on my face the entire final battle. But when Superman came in and just took the axe in the shoulder, and he just goes like, not impressed. I was just fucking right.
Yeah, man. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I know that a lot of people don't really dig Snyder's kind of brooding version of Superman, and I get that. I'm not a huge fan of. I like Man of Steel. I don't really like BVS, Batman v Superman, but I think when Snyder does when Superman is allowed to like unleash and kind of be this ultimate badass, Snyder gets that right. And that moment, was perfectly kind of encapsulated, just kind of like axe to the chest, nothing, just not impressed. And they just beat the shit out of Steppenwolf, and it's fun. And Snyder is such a better action filmmaker than I think he's a better director overall. I wouldn't say okay. It's hard to say because I love the original Avengers. I love it by Joss Whedon. I really like Age of Ultron, but I never considered Joss Whedon to be a visually stylish filmmaker. It's especially the first Avengers. It's not bad looking, but it's just kind of like, okay, we got the right coverage. Everybody's in frame, stuff like that. Snyder's so much better when it comes to these visuals, and not even just like the slow-mo like tableaus, but really just like the way that action scenes are pieced together. The way that whole final battle took place was terrific. The whole sewer battle was much better. Like that scene that you brought up with the Flash, and he's helping out Diana. If you have the time, just kind of watch that moment. It's about a minute long, maybe, from the Snyders version, and then watch the Justice League from 2017. And it's a lot of the same footage, but it just plays so differently because they rebuilt everything from the ground up, from the music to the sound effects to the visual effects to everything. So it plays so differently, and the way it just builds up to this really like we've seen that moment in the original version, and it was like, oh, it's cool. It's kind of like that Vatican painting of like the two fingers touching. That's kind of cool. But it had this moment, it had this weight in Snyder's version of him like seeing what's going on, being like, holy crap, and then kind of like stepping off, and then kind of he runs around. I don't know, there's little moments like that where it's like, yeah, a lot of these parts were in the original version, but they were just not done as well. They were cut to shit. Yeah.
Well, and another thing, you mentioned the music, and one thing I really didn't like about the theatrical cut, and this is weird because I'm a Danny Elfman fan. His Batman scores, I love it. But they brought him in, and he did have that like pretentious thing that he said about how there's only one Batman theme and it's his. And it's like, okay, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, first off, no, that came first. Not to mention, I love Hans Zimmer's music from the Nolan trilogy. I think it's fantastic. Not as iconic as Elfman's, but it's still really good. So he was a little up his own ass on that. That said, when he brought in a little element of his Batman score in the Whedon cut, I got some chills. He did a little bit of the John Williams Donner Superman. That was cool. But the score in that movie just felt very flat to me. And my biggest problem with it was what he did to the Wonder Woman theme, which he reorchestrated with horns and strings. And it wasn't just drums and that electric organ, sorry,
Mhm.
electric cello, excuse me, which is such a like that original Wonder Woman theme that Hans Zimmer did. It's so good, and the electric cello
Mhm.
makes it feel very otherworldly. Of course, she's from another world, and so I love that Junkie XL, who scored this cut of the film, went back to that version. And that moment in the bank where she comes in uh and the music just kicks, and like I just yeah.
Yeah. No,
The
I
piece,
felt that too. It's funny because I remember first hearing Wonder Woman's theme in Batman v Superman, and it was so out there that I was kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like I didn't dislike it, but I was kind of like, oh, this is weird. What is that a guitar? Oh, it's electric cello. I didn't know that was a thing. But I didn't realize how much I liked it until it kicked in here. I think it also kicked in during that kind of underwater, not underwater, the sewer fight that they had with Steppenwolf. It kicked in there, and I was like, hell yeah! Like
right?
I got like into it. I thought Junkie XL's score was really good in this. It was appropriately bombastic where it needed to be. The touches of Zimmer's Man of Steel score through certain moments was really nice. There was a couple recurring. There was like a new kind of Amazonian, like
Yeah,
that.
that
just
was a
have that.
little,
Just have that on a loop of me doing that as our new theme song.
yes.
That was a bit. That was a bit much. But for overall, I thought the score was really good. It was obviously I like Danny Elfman. That was not his best work. I felt like he phoned that in.
Well, I think it was also a rush job too. I
Oh,
don't think
for
he had a
sure,
lot of time to work on it, but
for sure. I really thought that Junkie XL score was quite good for this.
and I'm a huge fan of Hans Zimmer's uh, Superman theme. And
Yeah.
that moment where they're in the warehouse and they're talking about how house turns to smoke, but smoke can turn, and Flash says like, I'm not gonna say it, but we're all thinking it, right? And then Cyborg does the hologram of Superman, and the score that swells, and like, oh, I got chills in that moment.
Yeah, yes, kids. Like I said, it is going to sound pretentious, but this is if you want to know like what is direction. If you it's kind of like a seemingly vague sort of like statement. How do you tell what direction is? There's a similar scene in the Justice League where the dialogues change. They're kind of talking like, and they're talking straight up about like, okay, so we have to go we have to go wake up Superman. We have to go revive Superman. That's what they're talking about. They're saying it out in the open, and they're kind of just casually talking, just cut, 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 cut. In this version, they're having this conversation, and the camera's slowly kind of rotating. So you see everybody, you see the reaction, and they don't say it. In fact, they specifically, the Flash specifically says like, all right, who's going to say it? And nobody does.
Yeah,
The camera continues to rotate. You see the holographic image of Superman. You get it, and then it ends with this kind of two shot of the red cape with Ben Affleck's Batman, and you know what they have to do without saying anything.
yeah.
That's good direction.
Mhm.
I don't know what to say, Joss. I'm sorry.
Um, one thing I want to touch on. Um, well, I guess okay. We should talk about Steppenwolf, played by Kieran Hines, who Mance Rayder on Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
I love his voice in this role. I think it's really cool. And I
Yeah.
will say, again, the Whedon cut was rushed towards the end, and some of the visual effects in that version are quite good. Steppenwolf looked awful. I still don't think he looks great. I think he looks better. I think the CGI, the textures of his skin look better. I like the redesign. Still don't love it. And I will say that you want to talk about fucking metal. That scene at the end where like where the boom tube opens up
Mhm.
and he's like being thrown through it, but Wonder Woman jumps out there the last second, cuts his head off.
Yeah.
The shot when his head comes in and rolls to Darkseid's feet looked ridiculous. I don't know
Mhm.
if it was the face he was making or what. I thought that was awful. Darkseid, again, I don't love the design. It looked cooler in the context of the movie than it did in the trailers to me.
Yeah.
And of course, we get a little bit more of him.
Mhm.
I still didn't think it looked amazing, but again, Steppenwolf anyway, market improvement on the original. And I did like that effect that they did whenever he was talking to Desaad or Darkseid through the sort of hologram, where the hologram was like fire dripping down.
Mhm.
That was cool. I thought that was neat. That looked good.
Yeah.
I thought most of the visual effects in this cut were pretty solid. There was a moment, I believe it was when Barry was breaking the light barrier. There was one shot. I think there were like rocks flying or something, and it looked completely whack. It looked completely unfinished. But overall, I would say from a visual effects standpoint, this is an improvement. What do you think?
I agree. I think that, yeah, like I said, for the most part, the visual effects were very good. There were some moments where it didn't look as good. There was still some kind of wonky green screen moments, especially kind of during the Themyscira scene, which I really, really enjoy that scene, especially in this version where essentially it's the Amazonians are kind of playing keep away from from Steppenwolf. I thought that was really well done, but there was a lot of like, yeah, that's a green screen. And there were a couple CGI moments where it felt like that wasn't finished, and I get it. You know, they had 70 million to complete this whole thing.
A
um
4 hour movie that probably most of the shots have visual effects in them.
yeah, so there were moments where but there was moments where it was actually very good. There was like certain moments when, like you said, Steppenwolf was kind of talking to um, kind of their version of a Star Wars hologram. I don't know what you would call it, but that slab of metal where they were like melting into it or out of it, which was really cool visually. But there were certain moments where they did like these close-ups on Steppenwolf, and I was like, damn, the texture on his skin is actually like excellent. That's clear that they weren't effing around when it came to close-ups. They knew, they're like, we gotta make this look good, because it wasn't just like the scaly texture of his skin. I noticed on the armor there was like this little thing where it's like this kind of shiny armor, but it wasn't polished. Like there, you could see that it looked like there were scratches on it and there was dirt on it
Hmm.
and stuff. um so stuff like that, where I was like, really good attention to detail. I'm not gonna harp on some of the bad effects. It didn't fully kind of pull me. I mean, there were certain moments that pulled me out, but I'm not gonna be like, oh wow, this is the best you can do with 70 million.
Right.
Like it was good. I thought it was good. It's funny, I seeing the design, because we've seen the new Steppenwolf design leading up to this. I thought it was okay. In the movie, it worked more for me. I kind of liked that the his armor kind of moved like it was twitching. That was a
Yeah,
neat
that was
design.
cool. That was cool.
You're right. It's not the greatest design ever or anything like that, especially because the original. Nah, I'm not a stickler for this kind of stuff, but the original comics design of Steppenwolf is he's just a guy. Like he's literally just a human. He's not like a weird alien creature.
Yeah, doesn't he like have a mustache and wear a hat or something?
Yeah, his hat's pointy like that, but
Right.
they made him now have a pointy alien head. So yeah, I thought it was fine. I thought that overall, like, it was good to serviceable, the special effects.
There's one scene I want to talk about. And this scene was in the original trailers. It was not in the original movie, but it's when Barry goes on the job interview at the dog walking place, and Iris West is out in the street. She's about to get hit by a car, and we see him go sort of push his finger through the window, and it has this almost liquid look to it. Thought that looked amazing. Like the visual effects there were great. It was framed beautifully. I loved it. Cool scene. Didn't need to be in the movie at all. Like it didn't really add anything other than right, he's fast, but we already know that.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too. I thought they spent too long on the guy with the burger in the truck. Like you didn't need to keep cutting back to it. Like we see what's happening. But my biggest issue with that scene, and I really didn't like this, and I know that like in the comics, Iris West is his girlfriend or whatever, and I guess they were setting that up for later on. But when he's running and she's thrown from her car and he's going around her and he reaches up and he caresses her face,
Yeah.
that was so fucking creepy to me. Like that really took me out of the moment
Bad
of what
touch.
was a cool scene. But
Yeah, because it raises bad implications of like, okay, so he's so fast he can touch people. I mean, like you think of it, it's not. I mean, it's like kind of an obvious thought, like if you know the Flash's power, but it is weird. It's like this dude's just thrown from her car. Her life, for in her eyes, her life is about to fucking end, and he's just like caressing her hair. And there's a weird thing of like, look, I'm not just being a 12-year-old about this. There's clearly a hot dog right by her face that
yeah,
he slowly grabs. They do something with the hot dog, but you don't need to be, Freud to be like, in this semi-romantic scene that there's a phallic image right by her face. What does that mean? And it's weird. Yeah.
I was really worried they were going to go somewhere with that, and they did, but not in that direction, thankfully. But it just being there. I mean,
there were some cool visual elements to it. I agree. The scene didn't really work for me. The song choice didn't work for me. Him kind of, like I said, caressing her face was creepy. You don't want your heroes to be weird like that, to kind of like, to an extent, even though he wasn't touching her anywhere necessarily inappropriate, it's still kind of touching her on his own terms without her consenting. And I don't think I'm being hypersensitive about it. It was weird. And I get it as well that they were trying to show him like gently kind of push her down, but at the same time that made it seem creepier. Like he was still kind of like being gently, like kind of caressing her. And it's like, no, just kind of safely move her with a purpose. Don't have to be weird about it. Yeah, I could have cut that scene, especially because the dialogue leading up to it about him being like, sorry, I'm late. There was traffic. Am I right? I'm like, this isn't working. This is not funny.
well, and even if you wanted to keep the scene in, you could cut the shot of the caressing the cheek, because here's the thing. I get that they shot this years ago, long before footage came out of Ezra Miller choking a woman in, I think it was in Iceland or something, right? Like right at the beginning of the pandemic. And
so physical abuse is not funny, guys. I don't know why. Just the way you said that just caught me off guard.
Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, like, why not cut that shot? Because I know that was when he caressed her cheek, that was the first thing I thought of, and it completely took me out of the moment.
I'm not gonna do it, but I was just thinking of intercutting that moment with the dialogue. I forget what he says in that video. He's like, "You want a fucking autograph or something?" It's so weird. It's weird. I would have, you could have had a moment of like maybe him just stopping for a second, locking eyes,
sure,
and then saving her. But yeah, the hot dog and touching her face, and
it felt very like sophomoric,
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so before we get to the epilogue, which we do obviously have to talk about, are there any other specific sequences that you want to talk about, or should we just move on?
Yeah, nothing, like just kind of a quick run through of things. I like nothing to linger on. Brief moment. I loved this. It's another flash moment. Was right after or is during the sewer battle where they take everybody outside, and like a lot of the prisoners and the hostages from the aliens, the parademons. And there's a moment where like debris is falling, and in a flash, in a moment, he goes in above everybody. He's like zipping around and blocking all of the debris from falling on him. But the way it's depicted is in real time, and there's smoke, and it looks like little flashes of like poses, because he's going so fast that it's like lightning will flash and you'll just see woo, 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 woo.
Right.
I thought that, I was like, that's awesome. What a cool, unique way to kind of depict this kind of Speed Force energy or superpower that he has. So little moments like that. I thought Billy Crudup for 2 scenes he killed it.
He was good.
I wish he was going to be in the Flash movie now, because I actually really liked it. Yeah, before we get into the epilogue, I really enjoyed it. Even the somewhat complaints that I have didn't hinder it for me, and it just felt like it was so much a labor of love from Zack for his daughter who passed away, to the fans. It was hard even to be upset even by the things that didn't work. I wasn't like, oh, well, I would have cut that. I really tried not to armchair quarterback this thing. I really just kind of was letting it, like, yeah, this is his vision, and it's something you don't see that often, of such a personal, unique, singular vision for such a big, bombastic studio film.
Right.
It's cool.
And I'll say, like that moment at the end where the title came up for Autumn. I don't know Zack Snyder. I didn't know Autumn. I got a little bit choked up, and maybe that's just knowing the whole story, and particularly seeing like this being, I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say that this is kind of Zack Snyder's magnum opus.
Probably, yeah.
So for that to just sort of be the bookend on it, I thought was really quite beautiful. And just quickly, we've been kind of talking a lot about how he's great at making things look great. I found out recently, so his upcoming Netflix zombie movie, Army of the Dead, he's not only directing that, but he's shooting it as well. He's a cinematographer.
Oh, he's a DP? That makes sense. I was wondering when he was just gonna be like, all right, let's cut the BS. I'm shooting this all myself. Cool, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm interested in seeing that.
All right, so let's talk about the epilogue, and then we'll wrap the show up. So,
Which one?
yeah, well, I mean, I think the nightmare sequence is the one we really need to talk about, don't you?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, just quickly before that, uh, yeah, I like the initial epilogue a lot of just kind of wrapping up everyone's storyline. Dug that. The thing with Lex Luthor, didn't care that it was mostly the same from the theatrical version. Slight differences in the dialogue between him and Deathstroke, setting up for a Batman Ben Affleck movie, which is not going to happen. So that one I didn't really care about. But yeah, the nightmare sequence, which had a lot of people hyped, and I'll start off. I liked it. I honestly, it makes me excited it makes me want to see a Justice League 2 from Zack Snyder.
Me too.
If this is the direction they're going in, like this sort of like band of outsiders, these kind of this ragtag team of Batman, the Flash, Cyborg, Mara for some reason. I mean, Aquaman's dead in this future. Uh Deathstroke and the Joker, Batman the Joker teaming up, going on this weird Mad Max post-apocalyptic journey with Superman being one of the big bad guys. That sounds awesome. That sounds really cool. And hell yeah, I want to see that.
Well, and one of the things that I was so intrigued by was because we have the Lex Luthor scene earlier where he tells Deathstroke, Bruce Wayne is Batman. Deathstroke clearly wants to go kill him. Okay, how did we get here that now they're on the same team?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, you could say the same thing about the Joker, but I didn't get the impression that, like, I got the impression that he and Deathstroke were on the same team. Mm-hmm. Joker was an outlier. They say they're going to have a truce, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's a team. I really mostly really liked the back and forth between Batman and the Joker, and I found this out too. At no point were they on set together.
I figured.
They shot Jared Leto in one place. They shot Ben Affleck in another place. And Ezra Miller was actually shooting, I think he was in the UK shooting Fantastic Beasts 2 at the time. Mm-hmm. So the crew, as a favor to Snyder, just shot it for him on a green screen, and Snyder like directed via Zoom. I just thought that was cool, a little peek behind the curtain. But
yeah,
but I liked the conversation between Batman and the Joker, except for two things. I don't feel like Batman needed to say, "I'll fucking kill you." It didn't really bother me, but it felt, people accuse Zack Snyder of being a bit edgelord, and I think it came through there a little bit. I'll get more to that in a second, but we've talked about this before, how this version of the Joker has a sexual nature to him, with Ike Barinholtz in the last movie, like makes him kiss his hand, and I could tell you meant that, and all that purring and weird stuff that he was doing as intimidation. He says to Batman, "Who else is going to give you a reach around?" And in that moment, I was so like flabbergasted by it, because it's just so out of place. In that moment, I talked to a buddy of mine, and he had the exact same thought. In that moment, I was like, "Is there another definition for reach around that I'm not aware of?" Or he is now. So this is what? Okay, why?
Well, Court, who else is going to give Batman a reach around? Do you think Deathstroke will? Because I don't think he will. He doesn't seem like that kind of lover.
Let me put it to you this way. Bruce Wayne is rich and attractive. I think he's probably doing okay on the reach arounds.
Even in the post-apocalypse, you don't know. It's hard out there. Okay, no. Jokes aside, it did remind me of Kevin Smith did a Batman series, or he did a couple comic series back in the day, and there was a moment similar where Batman was talking to Joker, and the Joker was being very sexual as well. Like, it was weird. So it reminded me of that. I don't think it was intentional, but like, I definitely got that vibe. I completely understand why it bothered a lot of people, yourself included. It didn't like bother me or upset me. If it was like unnecessary, I'm like, that's corny. I get that it can kind of come across a bit edgelord. Yeah, I would have cut it. I wouldn't have put it in, but I wasn't like, they said that's in my Batman movie. It's fine. I'm doing Andris's way of saying
I caught it.
I also okay, so I would cut the reach around line. You know, it's dumb. I didn't mind the Batman cussing. Again, it's like it's the post-apocalypse. It's he's like been Batman for 20 plus years. He can cuss. He's already
And
yeah,
and
good.
technically it was a dream too.
Yeah, he in his dream he's a potty mouth. So that's just so you know. But here's the thing, you know what I noticed, or was something that I thought of. You know, technically speaking, there was like a brief moment in Suicide Squad where they were in the same vicinity, Batman and the Joker. But this is the first time since 2008 that we've had on screen a Batman and Joker interaction, an
Yeah.
actual dialogue, because the Joker's never been known as one of his physically formidable foes. They're not really. I mean, Batman beats the snot out of him relentlessly throughout comics and movies and TV shows. But really, the true meat of their dynamic is these sort of back and forth kind of conversations, and I dug it. I was really kind of like acutely aware of I haven't seen something like this since 2008, and that's weird to think about. And I'm into it. I just the discussion between the Joker egging Batman on with Robin sending in a boy wonder to do a man's job, all really good. And two things. One, I liked Jared Leto. I thought he was good. I was like, this is still similar enough to the Suicide Squad version where it doesn't feel like a complete 180, but it seems properly reined in. It seems
Yeah.
like all the things that he was trying to do, but just with a more cohesive direction. To like I said, if they were going to do a Zack Snyder's Justice League 2, bring Leto back. I want to see that Joker with this Batman. I think that's an interesting kind of dichotomy. The last thing I'll say about it, I really liked the way that it was shot. It was like handheld right in his face. It was similar to kind of how we're talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier. There were some heavy close-ups on him, and it just felt like this really creepy kind of invasive conversation that the two of them were having. This very
Right.
kind of like it's weird. So yeah, for most of it, I liked it. I was into the conversation. It was a little too brief. Wanted more, makes me want more, which I think was the intention.
I'll say what I loved about that conversation
Hmm.
is when, Batman says when Harley Quinn was dying and bleeding out, she made me promise that when I kill you, and I'll fucking kill you,
Hmm.
that I'm gonna make it slow. And then it cuts to Jared Leto's Joker, and he's afraid. He's afraid of Batman in that moment. Doesn't last very long, and then you had me, whatever.
Yeah.
But for a second, Batman got through to the Joker and
Hmm.
scared him. And you don't think of the Joker being scared ever.
No.
And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. And it brings up the question as well. It's like if they are teaming up together, what he must be scared of something as well. He must be like
Right.
it's what is his goals? Like what are his goals, I should say. Um is he just kind of realizing like, okay, well, if we live in this post-apocalypse, it's not really fun being this crazy Joker dude, because it's like he kind of see he's a character that really kind of thrives on being sort of the outcast and being this anarchist antithesis to whatever society is. Um and so without a society, he's probably just like, fuck, I'm just this loser in the desert with with clown makeup on. Also, I mentioned it to you, no "we live in a society" quote, which I'm
Nope.
happy. I thought that
Yes.
was kind of lame.
Yep.
But I think someone mentioned to me that, which is weird to me, brings up more questions. But someone said that I mean, because I think we've known before that there's going to be a black and white version of the Justice League,
That's
and
what they're talking about. Yep.
yeah, and someone said that it's going to be in that version. So I'm like, is there more footage? Like, how much more footage? Is this not the extended edition? Is there going to be a 4 hour and 10 minute long version? So I don't know. That's strange to me,
I hadn't heard that. I just assumed that was Zack Snyder trolling us.
which is funny. I
Yeah,
like
and
it.
if true, well done, sir. Well done. You
Got
got us
people.
all.
It got people talking. Got people interested. So that's the Ralph Boner jokes from WandaVision. Don't like that trolling. Zack Snyder putting a meme in a trailer. That's funny.
Well,
I like it.
I kind of imagine that. I have no idea if this is true, but I kind of imagine like that's probably an idea, like a joke he came up with late in the game, because of course we don't see the Joker say we live in a society. It's before it cuts to him. So I'm sure he's just like got, Jared Leto on the phone and just, can you just say this for me quick? Just toss it in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was great. It was funny.
Yeah. I'm glad it wasn't in the final.
Yeah.
Final thing though, because it wasn't necessary. Because it also didn't make any sense because they weren't in a society anymore. But
right.
That's neither here nor there. But yeah, that's cool. I want to see that set up. And I don't know if you've read anything about what the plans were for future installments. Sounds interesting. Sounds like a weird, wild, epic ride that Snyder had planned. And I'd say go for it. I really do kind of hope now. I'm not going to be one of the people that's kind of pushing the hashtags or anything or demanding Warner Brothers does this, because I don't think another theatrical released Snyder film for Justice League is going to happen. But HBO Max, if this really does reel in a significant amount of new subscribers for you, why not? I mean, like I said, there's television shows now that are already like WandaVision was like 200 plus million to make. And they're making a bunch of Marvel movies or Marvel shows like with similar price tags. I say just why not? If there's interest in it, I'd say go for it. Make another Snyder Justice League.
I'd be into it.
On HBO Max, I should say. Make it, similar. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's the show. I guess so you would recommend
yes, absolutely. Unless you guys are, for a fact that you hate Zack Snyder's, work, you're just a massive, this isn't going to turn you around. But I'd say for the DC fans, this is a must see. For comic book fans, this is a very good film. If you were kind of on the fence about it, check it out. I think that would be pleasantly surprised. Don't feel pressure to watch it all at once. Space it out because it's a lot of movie. There's a lot to chew on. And I think that it would be rewarding if you have any sort of interest in this.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. So that is the show for this week. We will be back next week with Andris. I don't know what we're going to be talking about yet, but we'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, Chris, where can people follow you online?
They can follow me on my Instagram handle, which is Art of Light and Shadow. Talk a lot of just whatever I'm watching with sometimes artsy movies, sometimes Zack Snyder's Justice League, very as mainstream as you can get, but it's a fun time. So check it out.
Okay. And you guys can follow me here on my channel, of course, on YouTube and on Instagram and Twitter at Courtshake. We want to thank you guys for watching. We hope you are all safe and healthy in this time. And if you haven't already, would love it if you drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, all the YouTube stuff. You know how it goes. So again, thanks for watching. We will see you guys next week and take care.
Take it easy, guys. Bye now.